Hey, everybody, Dr. Meri Crowley for Now is the Time. Got an amazing guest on today's program, Lewis Herms, and Screw Big Gov. I've met him, recently. We met a little while ago, but actually had the opportunity to be with him and his wife. There's an event coming up this weekend up at Church of Glad Tidings. It all has to do with anti-trafficking. There's going to be some amazing people there. So we'll talk more about that at the end of the show. But I was just amazed talking to him because he's a documentary and filmmaker. He's done a lot of different things, podcasts. I know that he's been at my events. Been around different things with Juan, and it's just exciting to see God bringing the community together. So we're going to be talking about some of the tunnels in Los Angeles, even with P. Diddy and some of the things that are going on. But before we do that, we're going to roll the commercial that has to do with allergies and QE Strong. I was just up a couple of days ago up in San Luis Obispo, Lewis, and I got the stupid allergy just hit me, and I actually took some of this, and it really works. Let's roll that, please.
The quantum effect wipes out pain and allergy symptoms in less than 30 seconds with 0 drugs. Pastor Dave and hundreds of others have experienced the quantum effect for themselves. It's backed by scientific research and rigorous lab testing. Quantum is simply about 2 things. 1, intentions, as a man thinketh so he is, and 2, renewing your mind with the Word of God. Only QE Strong encodes key intentions and Bible verses about healing onto the small patch. You simply place it on your body each day, and with a bonus prayer guide, read out loud a positive intention and 1 or 2 Bible verses about healing each day. The patch provides the touch, and the prayer guide uses your sight, speech, and hearing to relieve pain and allergy symptoms with the senses God gave you. It even works for people who have suffered decades of chronic symptoms. Are you ready to experience the quantum effect? Go to QEstrong.com/Meri.
Yeah, QEstrong.com. If you put Meri, it's right in the middle of America, MERI, you'll get a significant discount. It really does work because allergies they stink. You know what I mean? Literally, they're bad. But anyway, Lewis, it's great to have you on. I'm excited. The first time I've interviewed you.
This is great. Did I just see Pastor Dave without a beard?
Probably.
I could have sworn that today. I was like, wow, that's interesting. It's good to be here. Nice to see you again. Looking forward to being with you and the other amazing speakers that are going to be at Rev 17 just this weekend. So this is going to be really pretty cool. And yeah, it's interesting that people tend to avoid the human trafficking, child trafficking conversation like the plague. And I think that's why it's been so prevalent, because people are afraid of the conversation, and we should be running to it, not from it.
Well, Lewis, the Lord Jesus said that what you do to the least of these, you do unto me. And if we don't stand up for them, then the blood's on our hands. Literally. I mean, I came back from Thailand in 2017, and God spoke to me and he said, I didn't call you to do this about Thailand. I think he wanted me to see it because it's the #1 sex tourist destination in the world. But when I came back, he said, I want you to show what's happening in America. And so you actually, with the P. Diddy, trial that's going on right now, and there's a lot of exposure. We're both in the Hollywood area. We're both in the film business in some respect. And, what I've seen, Lewis, and I know you've got some footage that we're going to be going over that doesn't relate to Diddy, but a lot of people don't get to this level of fame and power typically unless they bow. Is that kind of what you've seen?
Yeah, they have to take a deal. It is what it is. I will give a pass to many B-listers and C-listers, and even some directors and lower level producers. But if you're an A-lister, the top of the top, more than likely you've taken a deal. Now, it's interesting. People are under the myth that they take the deal ahead of time. They know going in, and therefore they're promoted up the ranks. It doesn't really work like that. The way it works is, if you're talented, the evildoers seek out the talented ones because they can use them as a pawn for themselves. And therefore they put them in a compromising position. This is I believe the reason why you saw so many one-hit wonders during the 80s is that's right when they started bringing up this idea of you have to sign yourself over to the devil, in essence, in order to take their deal. And this was uncomfortable. And a lot of them were like, oh, I'm out. Now they've figured out, and this is where Diddy comes in and Epstein comes in, and what I'm going to show you today. I believe the baddies have figured out, well, let's just get them in a compromised position so they almost have to take the deal. That's the level that we're at right now. So, yeah, I would say most of the A-listers or the really, really popular people, unfortunately, they took a deal or were forced to take a deal.
Well, and I interviewed a guy, an former NYPD detective named James Rothstein, and he told me, because he was covering a lot of the pedophile networks. He worked on like the Son of Sam, a lot of these just different, the smiley face killers, a number of things. And he said he'd get to the highest levels to start busting, the high level people, and then the feds would step in and say national security. That's
right.
what they'd use. Kathy O'Brien said the same thing, and then they'd shut it down. So you'd never get beyond a certain level, and that's why they keep perpetrating it. Well, let's get into some of this stuff, because you have some things to show us, which I think is very interesting. I know I saw you on Nino's show, and it was pretty great. So what are we going to be seeing when we look at this footage?
So what happened is, back in the day, in the 90s, around 93-ish, I actually was a troubleshooter for the largest commercial plumbing and drain company in California. And what happened is I was a troubleshooter because I had this knack of figuring out a problem and finding a solution. So me and my buddy were the top guys, troubleshooters and managers in the area and our clients were like Food for Less, Denny's, Carl's Jr., Vaughn's, Ralph's, Albertsons, you name it, Black Angus, all the big corporate entities, and from a commercial standpoint. So one of the owners of Food for Less, and I believe it was Albertsons at the time, and something else, called the owner and he said, hey, I'm looking to buy a property in Beverly Hills. I need your two best guys. I think that's Lewis, and I won't name my friend. And this other guy says, can he come over? I want them to assess this property because I'm trying to, at the time we didn't know why, but he was trying to drive the price down. So he wanted to spend a lot of time assessing all the plumbing and drain cleaning on this property. We didn't know what we're getting into, but I'm going to take you through.
What year was this, Lewis?
This was, I believe, 93. So what we did is, in fact, I'll show the screen now. We ended up going to this property in Beverly Hills. And what we found, which was fascinating, is when we pulled up to the front gate, it was a standard, beautiful front gate, Beverly Hills, everything is covered, high walls around this whole thing. So they clearly were trying to hide whatever security they had. And if we can access the screen, I'll show you the images while we're doing that.
Yeah, I was trying to bring it up. Can you pull it up? There it is.
You got it. We're not on the side, but it's either way you want to have it. That's fine. So this is blurred out on Google right now. So if you were to pull up to the property, this is what you would see on Google. But what happened is, so we went through security. Now remember, this place is supposed to be on in escrow, so therefore it's supposed to be unoccupied. So this is the property from above. When we entered through the gate, which you can see over here on the right side is where we entered. Here's what's crazy, Meri. So they have the outer wall here, and then they had an inner wall inside of here. So literally the people coming in are funneled in for security purposes. They can't see past here. And they get in what we call a shooting gallery in case there's an issue. So they funnel them here. So this is high security. The security has their own little housing area right here on the property. We pull up here, two security guys meet us. We address who we are. They said, that's fine. And we said, what we have to do. They said, we're aware of that. So we start going through this whole property. And at the time, what we saw was interesting, but what we learned later it's very clear that there's something more sinister going on here. So I'm just going to go through some slides.
Yeah. Wow.
Uh,
That's amazing. So
this is the, go ahead.
go ahead.
So that's the back of the house here, right? And it's gorgeous. So what this property is called, by the way, it's famous. It's called Green Acres, and it used to be owned by Harold Lloyd, which is a famous silent film director, and he moved kind of into the talkies back then. And this is a famous deal. What we didn't know at the time is the owner wanted to purchase this property because he wanted to move himself in to Hollywood as a producer. And I'm going to explain why. Because this property every year had the highest attended charity event in regards to the most influential people in the world every year on this property for Hollywood and politics. So the guy wanted to get his foot in the door in this, and he was successful. So he ended up purchasing this house for, I believe it was 19 million, and the original selling price was 40 million. Talk about a reduction.
This was what year would you say, Lewis?
93, I believe it was.
Okay.
So when we're walking through the property, we saw some interesting stuff. This is actually a miniature house that's on the property. I believe they ended up calling this area Fairyland, but it was so detailed that when we crawled in, because we couldn't stand up to get into it, when we crawled in, there's actually a working porcelain sink and toilet inside this little home. So this home was, and it's miniaturized. I've never seen a miniaturized toilet and a sink, especially not one that functioned. So this was built for children. At the time, we didn't think anything. They actually have this. This is an actual picture. This is a horse carousel that is on site on this property. So in our mind at the time, or in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so, these are famous people that live here. They probably just want their kids to have fun. They don't want their kids to be exposed to the public. I didn't think about the sinister ramifications until I learned stuff in the future. This is actually in the back of the house. And there's two things really weird about this. Number one, this street here has been completely erased from Google. It's not even considered a street, but you can drive on it. It's an actual street. There's a secret entrance to the back of the property right here, where these are bushes that are attached to a fence that actually roll back in, and they're alive, and you can drive or walk through this area. It's crazy. Again, we didn't think anything. We just thought these people were very, very eccentric. So there's a lot of great stuff on this property. Very cool. Some a little bit crazy, very eccentric. And then when you go upstairs, okay, well, first when you walk in, you see two full kitchens that have massive ovens and refrigerators. And I've figured out they could probably hold about 30 employees at one time. That's huge. We found out later the reason why is they didn't want to cater food out in. They wanted everything to be built on site. So they had to have complete control. I now know why, and I'll explain that going through. So when we went upstairs, they had something called the black room, which was this, and the black room had a black pool table. By the way, these are AI generated, just so you know. It had a black pool table, black pictures of famous people. Everything was black. Next to it, there's attached to it a huge bathroom with a black urinal. It actually went to the floor. Black pictures in there, black toilets, black sink, gold fixtures all around, and there's your Masonic floor. So all this stuff that was inside the house. At the time, we were naive. We didn't understand the ramifications. So then we went back downstairs. Those are upstairs. We went back downstairs, and you could see, how you watch a movie and it seems like on the movies of somebody's wealthy house, you see these huge, beautiful, round mahogany libraries with the ladder attached to it that goes around, right?
Yeah.
They actually had one of those in this house. And my friend and I, remember the house is vacant. We had security following us for about a day and a half everywhere. I finally called the owner and I said, would you like to spend more or would you want to spend less? And he goes, Lewis, that's a ludicrous question. Of course, less. I said, I don't know what you're worried about, but call off your dogs. They're tripping over our cords. We're tripping over them. we have to, it moved very slowly to get anything done. I said, I don't know what you have to worry about. We're just checking everything. He said, you're right. I'll call them off. So then they let us loose. Now, back in the day, in the 90s, they didn't have a bunch of cameras inside the house like they have now. So they weren't tracking our movements. They didn't know that I had an ulterior method, and that was my friend and I really wanted to really investigate this house because we thought it was pretty cool, right? And clearly they were trying to hide something. So when we were up in the library, I asked him to play lookout because we were joking around. We're like, wow, I bet you there's a secret door behind the library, the bookshelves. And we're just joking around, right? We didn't really think there was a secret door. Sure enough, I'm pushing on one of the bookshelves, and this is an illustration, but I'm pushing on one of the bookshelves, and it pops back open like it was on a magnet, and there was a door there. And there's a door behind it. So we proceed to go in. I convinced him to go in. We shut the door behind us so they wouldn't have a clue. We proceed to go in here, and there's a stench of smell like you couldn't believe, of cedar. We went downstairs, roundabout, got down, and there's stench of cedar. We got down there, and there's about 20 to 30 feet of bookshelves, floor to ceiling, of cedar. Now, at the time, we were joking around. Hey, looks like Imelda Marcos must have lived here. We didn't know the ramifications of this. I'll explain here in a moment what that means. We went down into I believe it was to the right. We found a full room for viewing films underneath the ground there. We thought that was pretty interesting because now you see rooms like this with the reclining leather, blah, 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 blah. This was, we're talking over 30 years ago. This was not commonplace, right? So we thought that was pretty interesting. We continued to go down to the end and looked in another door on the right, and there was a miniature bowling alley set up, kids' toys and things like that. Again, I didn't think of the ramifications. We're like, okay, so they're down, you know, in their movie theater, and they want to have a place for kids. So we got down to the end of this tunnel. By the way, this is a tunnel underneath the ground, and we see this door, and we couldn't get through the door. It was locked tight. So, and it was the lock was strategic. It's not something anybody could have just busted through. Now, here's what's interesting. I called a friend of mine that I met and got him to bring search dogs to the Hurricane Helene situation. And I asked him, what would be the effect of a search dog if a search dog went in back in the 90s in and ran into that cedar smell? He said they would have shut down. The olfactories would have shut down. They're not trained for that or weren't trained for that back then. And I said, well, what would that be? And they said they would use cedar and things like that, something really, really strong, to turn the dogs off so they couldn't find decomposed bodies.
Wow.
And I was like, interesting. But it just looks like bookshelves, so you wouldn't think anything of it. But that was the only way to get back there to that door and to that place where the kids are. Now, I didn't learn about that until recently, and that's why I started really disclosing this stuff. Here's what's interesting. The owner of the house is the guy that you're going to get to know here. His name is Ron Burkle. He's a famous movie producer now, and he's the one that owned all those grocery stores. He's a multi-billionaire. One of his best buddies is this guy. That's Bill Clinton. Now, what I found out later, well, here on just to give you an idea, I believe these tunnels most likely connect to the Playboy Mansion. I've seen blueprints of the tunnels under the Playboy Mansion and pictures, and I've interviewed people. I know the tunnels under the Playboy Mansion are real. I know the tunnels under this Green Acres Burkle Mansion are real because I've been in them, right? And I believe they may actually connect to the Getty Center also, and maybe other properties nearby.
Well, just to interject briefly, Lewis, people don't understand that the whole, Hugh Hefner was a honeypot. It was a CIA honeypot ring, is what I've been told.
I did a whole expose on Hugh Hefner, and I have proof that it was a honeypot based on dates and times and connections. I can show you that offline. I did a full thread on X. It will blow you away. Everything I got dialed in by dates. Did you know? In fact, I actually have a picture of Hugh Hefner's yearbook from college, I believe the University of Illinois, and he was in a psychological operations department, is what his degree is so
well, and if you
he was
don't
being
remember, a lot
groomed
of
all the
people,
way in college.
well, you look at, excuse me, you look at the bunny ears, with the bunnies, but Marilyn Monroe was the first, Playboy bunny.
I actually made the adrenochrome connection right inside of his first magazine, which Marilyn Monroe was on the first cover of the magazine. Yeah, I'd love to go through that with you. It'll blow you away. I have pictures of all that stuff too. I did that one on Nina too, and a ton of people were just like, "This is crazy." So you're right. You're 100% right, and it's proof positive. There's no doubt about it. I even showed a secret door on top of the grotto that just blew Nina away. He didn't even know it was there.
Wow. Well, let's continue on.
So with these tunnels and everything, what I found out later on this mansion is I happened to be doing my construction business, and I met somebody, and we became friends, and we're talking, and she's the ex-wife of one of the most famous people in the world. I'll just say that because I don't want to pull her name out here. And we just happened to be talking, and I said, "Oh yeah, hey, I was at this mansion before. It was pretty cool, blah 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 blah." And she said, "Is that Green Acres?" At the time, I didn't know it was named Green Acres, so I go, "I don't know." I said the owner was Ron Burkle. She turned white, and I said, "What's going on?" And she says, "Oh my Lord, let me tell you about that place." She goes, I was good friends with Burkle's wife, and what he would do while Bill Clinton was president, he would bring President Clinton over for that big party I talked about, that charity. And then afterwards, President Clinton would send home his security team A, his Secret Service team A, and bring in Secret Service team B. So what did I do? I talked to a Secret Service agent, and he verified that was true, that he had an A and a B team. His B team was his close buddies, and they always kept their mouth shut. So what happened is, she said Burkle would send Burkle's wife and her away on these exotic vacations for a couple of weeks in that time frame. And she heard from, I believe it was security, that they would bring in underage girls through that back gate that I showed you.
Yeah.
And Clinton, while he told everybody he was at Martha's Vineyard, was actually staying for a week at a time, sometimes more, at this actual mansion in Beverly Hills and doing debaucherous things with these girls. Now, the reports are, we're trying to get the information, is that the girls may have came in tinted vehicles through the back gate, but nobody ever saw them leave, which is really scary considering the tunnels that are underneath the ground there. Now, that's important for back then, of course, but here's how it ties together today, and this is crazy. Burkle is actually the godfather of P. Diddy's children.
Oh my, really? Wow.
Yep. Oh, yep, it gets worse. Burkle gave P. Diddy $100 million for his Sean John clothing line, which probably wasn't worth $5. It's just absolute crap. $100 million. This is the way they work. I'm surmising myself. This is my open speculation. Yes, I'm running for governor and I don't give a darn. My open speculation is Burkle is probably an Epstein type guy, or probably more like a Les Wexner, Robert Maxwell, the one that funded the Epstein guy, funded Epstein, and Diddy is more like
and
Epstein.
Robert Maxwell was Ghislaine Maxwell's. Was that related to Ghislaine? Robert Maxwell?
Yes, Robert Maxwell was his Mossad, which is Ghislaine Maxwell's father.
Father?
So
Wow.
I kind of believe, and this is what I think about this place, but that's my assessment. Here's Epstein, right? There's Les Wexner and Robert Maxwell. And there's Burkle. Look at, do you recognize that place that Burkle is standing in front of right there? That's Neverland Ranch where Michael Jackson used to own. He purchased it after Michael Jackson passed away.
Wow. Well, I personally think Michael Jackson was murdered, but
Yep. That's all I have in images, by the way, if you want to bring the screen back. So
wow.
my assessment here is that this was a honeypot situation for trafficking, and it seems like it's very, and I use words like seems, allegedly, so on and so forth, because this is circumstantial. Now, this is heavy circumstantial evidence, right? But this really feels to me like he could have been the financier of P. Diddy. I mean, we know, because here's facts. Fact. He is P. Diddy's children's godfather. That's a fact. He's good friends with P. Diddy, had P. Diddy had his mansion several times. Those are facts. Facts. He gave P. Diddy $100 million. Facts. So we can make the assessments and add up everything based with the interviews I've had and the connections I just happen to have, which are all a God thing, right? I didn't know what I was even looking at back then. I thought it was interesting. And then I started to disclose it about 5 years ago because I thought it was crazy. But then I met somebody that was directly connected to this. And then I disclosed that. And then I started doing the research on this guy, Burkle, and I found his connections to Diddy. And I go, that's it. And then I put the information out and it went viral. So this is the type of stuff that we're dealing with through the Hollywood area for sure.
Well, and you talked a little bit about these tunnels. There's also tunnels that I've heard about that actually are under the Getty Museum too.
Yep.
In fact, I've talked to Allie Carter. I'm sure you know who she is, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, she's, somebody that said she's been under, and it's almost like, didn't she say there's like almost like a little city under there?
Yeah, I've heard that from several people. In fact, I talked to an operator, I'm not going to say any more, operator that actually has been in several tunnels underneath Hollywood. And what he told me he saw blow you away. Just absolutely blow you away. In fact, I'll give you one little piece. He said there's chains on the wall that could only be the height of little children and blood stains on the floor.
Well, if you go back, see, when I've been doing interviews for about 20 years, and 20 years ago, Lewis, I woke up one day, and you and I are both Christians, both believers in Jesus, and I heard the voice of God speak to me, saying, "I want you to build a studio to rival Disney and call it Destiny." And I was like, I don't really want to build a studio. I don't know how to build a studio. It was what I didn't understand what Disney was behind. And now I do. And Disney and Destiny have the same alphabetical letters, but Destiny is a T, which stands for the cross. So the reason I bring this up is because we're getting ready to take back what the enemy stolen. And I believe there's a renaissance. I know this is hard for some of you to listen to, but we have to expose it. And so the Getty Museum and, all these different things, do you probably know about the McMartin preschool then, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, go into that story a little bit. The McMartin preschool, these kids would be dropped off. The parents said, "Oh, we're going to work, whatever," and then the kids would say that there was tunnels going into some of these different mansions.
That's right, and they put them through all these rituals. They made them eat things, say things, do things. It was disgusting. But let's back up to the Getty really quick, because my wife and I actually went there to investigate it. And here's what we found, which will blow you away. This is a very, very expensive, probably the most or one of the most expensive museums on earth, right? And the artwork there is absolute crap. They don't have any high-end artists. And to us, I believe she came to the same conclusion of that it's just an absolute cover-up for something else. Because there's no reason. Why would this museum not have Monet and some of the top artists, Andy Warhol and everything? And they don't. You know what they did have though? They did have a ritualistic how to cast magic display in one full room, like the Magic Bible, which I thought was interesting. They had that, and they had their top artist was some guy from the Netherlands that I looked up that was virtually unknown. That doesn't make sense for the Getty. So immediately we both thought this really seemed like it was a cover for something more sinister.
Well, I I interviewed Liz Crokin in 2017. She came to the studio I had, and I didn't know. I mean, I knew about trafficking. I did different interviews about that. But when I interviewed Liz Crokin and she started talking about Pizzagate and all these different, the WikiLeaks and Podesta and all these other things, she told me a story off camera about how she'd been dating a guy and he was really close friends with this Getty guy. And she told me how she got really her eyes opened to some stuff. I won't get into the particulars because, you know what I mean? There's some sensitive information, but pretty much she said she started writing like blogs and different things about trafficking because she ended up getting sick. And so she was writing blogs to get different, monetary resources. And the articles would go viral, Lewis, and then she'd get fired. And she's thinking, wait a minute, why should I should be acknowledged that, I'm writing an article that's getting, hundreds of hits, thousands of hits. And so anyway, she started realizing about the trafficking. And when I didn't know what MK Ultra was. I had no clue. I mean, since I've had many events, Kathy O'Brien's come out. And so why don't you explain for the people, Lewis, because you now have a film that was released. How long ago was your Cages film released?
Right around the time of Sound of Freedom. In fact, our latest ad for it is step 1, watch Sound of Freedom. Step 2, because ours is a whole nother level, watch Cages. And what we did is, now this is a low budget film, but it's got like 99.7% thumbs up. It's really well received. What I did when I wrote this is I said, okay, for people to understand this, I'm going to do this from the perspective of the evildoers themselves. How do they think? What do they say? How do they believe when they perpetrate the stuff? And then I'll put in interviews, evidentiary interviews, and people that have been involved in cases and so on and so forth. And I did it on so many subjects. So it was on the border. It was on CPS, which is a huge issue.
Right.
It was on manipulation of judges and you name it. It goes on and on and on. Even the satanic element of it, the Freemasonry element.
And even when Bill Clinton signed into law the Adoption and Safe Families Act. And that's what really kind of tied in the CPS with, it's a pay-to-play scheme.
That's right. And that's the game they always play. The game that's the acts that sound like they're the best and the foundations that sound like they're the best are generally exactly opposite. It's a cover for their evil doing. So it's Cages. If anybody wants to watch it, they can go to my website or just go to watchcages.com. It's a full film. It's over 2 hours long. But it really dives deep in the perspective of how did these people think. Now, Meri, I always do this with all my films. I'm going to disclose, I'm going to hit it hard, but I don't like to break people. That's not my job, right? I'm not looking to break people because it doesn't do anything. So I show how at the end, how we can have a positive effect and make a difference in regards to these hard topics.
Right. And that's, my film Freedom Cry that I came out with in 2022. We've been showing it around the country when I do my events. Every single one of the ones that girls that were groomed, they're all girls from America. And even the pimp, it's a story of redemption. Every single one of them gets redeemed and restored. And it's beautiful because the pimp, Mark Miles, he's actually now a pastor. and he was in prison, and Jesus came to him in prison, and he had an encounter, and he just said he was sorry. I mean, he saw everything that he did. I mean, it's really a great film, and that's why I know God's connected, you and your wife and me and a lot of these ones around the world that are really exposing what's happening to these kids. And the problem is, Lewis, a lot of people don't believe there's people this evil.
I know, I know. And you know what? One of the biggest challenges I have, and you and I have had this conversation, is that the focus from government types and the police are just on the pimps and they don't go above that. And the reality is what's really going on is a much higher level than the pimps. The pimps are a cog in the machine, and I'm not saying they're doing good things because they're not, but they're being used in order to perpetuate this human trafficking. And the people above are the ones really making the money and in control. But when you get up to those levels and start investigating, suddenly these investigations just shut down. You've seen that, you've heard the experiences. I've run into that so many times where it's just like, oh, off limits, guys. Sorry, that's about all we can do on that.
National security is what they say.
Yeah, yeah,
National
that's a
security.
big so national security, folks, is another line for cover up,
Yeah.
protecting these people. That's what it is. And I'm hoping we don't hear the same thing with this Epstein list, because if they're going to play that game again, have we moved forward? I think they're going to start going after them, though.
Well, and we were talking about this before the show. The girl that was on the Epstein list that was supposedly, did she commit suicide, supposedly? What was
That's
her
what
name again? Virginia.
Virginia Guilfoyle.
Right. There was she came out with a video. What was it? I've just saw it this morning, saying that she was talking about, I guess, how she worked at Mar-a-Lago, and she was kind of the folding the towel girl, and her dad worked on the tennis courts, keeping that pristine. And as Ghislaine Maxwell came to her and said, hey, I'd like to, have you come to the island and you can teach you how to be a massage therapist. And she said she didn't realize just how bad it was. And she said she saw Obama down there all the time. And he was always going after the boys. That's his preferences, young boys.
Yeah.
And she brought up Bill Gates.
She saw him at the Epstein estate, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what she said.
Yeah, and she saw Bill Gates also. And
right.
Bill Gates was doing experiments on people. Crazy.
Yeah, she said there was people tied down. He was giving them, genetically, who knows what he was injecting into them. But this is the thing, what we're seeing with Oprah and all these different high-level celebrities that appear to be good, and maybe at one point they were. But as we kind of turn a corner here, Lewis, we don't just want to expose the evil. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And I believe that God is getting really ready to redeem the culture, that there's going to be a great awakening. But, this is why it's the men. See, I love, men, and I'm a believer in men and women. God made male and female. But what they try to do, and I've heard this on a podcast a couple years ago, Lewis, one guy in SGT Report said, when they want to take over a country or a nation, they flood it with porn.
And step one.
The step one. Why don't you tell what they do? Because the pornography then fuels it. And then, if there was no demand, there'd be no supply. And so right now, it's typically the women that are buying it. There is women traffickers, though, but it's the men. And you know what he told me, Lewis? He said, tell the men they're not a pimp, a pirate, or a pawn, but a prince and a king. And women, you're holy, not hoes. And God is going to take the culture into a thing where he's going to cleanse it, where, you know what I mean? We're going to have an encounter with God and Jesus, and it's going to like clean the slate. And why don't you explain, Lewis, what they do when they want to take over a culture? Because it seems like you know a little bit about this.
Well, I'll give you actually some evidence. So what happened is, in the biggest push to change our country happened in the 70s. And for you that are in the CIA, sorry, I'm going to offend you right now, because they were CIA, MI6, and believe it or not, they were colluding with some Russian spies also. So to give you an idea, you can just look at what happened in the 70s. So they brought back to the zeitgeist the psychologists. What's their favorite psychologist? There's sexual psychologists.
Kinsley report, or what's that guy was like a weird sick guy.
It'll come to me. So what happened is they brought back the writings from the psychologists, and everything turned back into sex. Everything was related to sex. And then what they did is they actually took over the astrological, right? Linda Goodman became their big one. They left a lot out of that, and they started pumping the astrology. Oh, but here's where it gets good. They took over a peaceful movement, and these were the hippies of the 60s, right? Moving in the 70s, and they infiltrated them. You know what the hippies of the early 60s, because they did exist in the early 60s, didn't have a lot of? They didn't have a lot of free sex and drugs. But what happened is the CIA got in there, they infiltrated their movement, and they started putting psychedelic drugs all throughout the movement, and explaining them that if you really love, you have to start having free sex. That completely destroyed that movement, which was just a peaceful movement. Whether people agree with their value set or whatever, it doesn't matter. But what happened is that's what they did. And the hippies of the past, i.e. my mom, had children of the future. And you can imagine how that starts to put society. They also started introducing soy and saying women should be working, and therefore you feed your children soy instead of giving them milk off the breast, which is the absolute best thing for a child. All this stuff happened, and they moved into that sexual revolution where the porn industry became huge in the 70s. In fact, right down the road from us, Chatsworth, California, was the porn capital of the world. And those crazy studios were actually located in Woodland Hills. I mean, their offices were in Woodland Hills and Encino in the San Fernando Valley. So it just became such a big thing. But you're right. The whole purpose is to bring people in a completely different direction, because they were pretty godly in the 50s, actually, right? So they said, how can we do this? This is how the infiltration started. And it was all calculated. Oh, Freud was the guy that they brought back into the zeitgeist. He was an unknown old time psychologist, and they brought him back in because his books were all about sex, and therefore the psychology of the day brought everything back to sex. So it was intentional. It was 100%. It was calculated. Sad to say, our CIA played a huge part in it.
Well, then I actually read a book called Weird Scenes from the Canyon. It talked about how a lot of the rock musicians, like Jim Morrison's father, was actually the admiral, I think, in the when the false flag that happened in Vietnam in the Bay of Tonkin or whatever. That was Jim Morrison's father, Frank Zappa. Their fathers were all part of the military industrial complex. And so you look at, like, even the Beatles, the Tavistock, and all these were manufactured. They were manufactured to get to the culture, to get them to, just like the 50s. It was like, you look back, I guess, the happy days, and they didn't want the families. They wanted to bring in, because I have a movie about this that I've been working on for a long time. Don't trust anyone over 30. But at the end of the 60s, Lewis, when, of course, you look at all the movements, you had the free speech movement out of Berkeley, you had the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King, you had the women's movement with Gloria Steinem, you had the Black Panthers movement, you had all these movements. At the end of the 60s, when they said God was dead, that's when God breathed upon the Jesus movement. And that's the movie that I've been working on, about this hippie preacher from the late 60s, early 70s, who God connected him with Chuck Smith, this conservative pastor that was actually going to quit because his little church wasn't growing. And through a series of divine coincidences, God connected them. down in Costa Mesa, California, when Lonnie was hitchhiking to evangelize. And one of Chuck Smith's daughter's boyfriend, John, picked him up, brought him right to Chuck Smith's door. And the rest is history. My film is called The Prodigal. There was a film called The Jesus Revolution. It came out 2 years ago, but that's really more about Greg Laurie. It does have Lonnie in there, but let me tell you, we are going to see, Lewis, and everyone watching, a great awakening where God is going to flip and expose all this demonic, dark, horrible things. He's going to flip it. The culture is going to be changed, and we're going to see God said a greater move that than has ever been known to man. We're coming into that time now, but I believe there's going to be a great shaking, Lewis, and what we're seeing right now. I talked about this on a live I did. Did you ever hear, and I'll just briefly talk about, did you ever hear where George Washington was visited by an angel in Valley Forge?
No, I haven't.
1777. Well,
No.
after a series of several defeats,
That got written out of history, of course, right?
well, you can find it because it was actually this 99-year-old guy. I think his name was Anthony Sherman. I had the notes from earlier today. In July 4th of 1859, shared his story to this journalist. And he said, I was there. General Washington came out of his study at Valley Forge and he was ashen, white-faced. And he basically relayed that he was in his office. He said, I don't want to be disturbed. And he heard the door open. He looked up and there was a beautiful female angel that walked in. And for the first, few minutes didn't say anything. And of course, General Washington was, surprised. And eventually, the angel said, Son of the Republic, look and learn. There's going to be 3 perils that's going to come upon the Union, basically describing America. The first one described the American Revolution that they were in at the time. Second one described the Civil War, but the third peril, this angel said, was the worst. And it said America would be surrounded. But that, let me see if I can find my notes from earlier today. I think this is important because, I wrote it down and I read this on the air this morning. It said, this is what it said. Son of the Republic. It says, what you have seen is thus far interpreted, because she explained about the different perils. 3 great perils will come upon the Republic. The most fearful is the third, but the whole world united shall not prevail against her. Let every child of the Republic learn to live for his God, his land, and the Union. And so we're at this time. I don't believe we've seen anything yet, Lewis. I mean, I'm not God. I believe it's going to, like Juan even says, I think it's going to look like a near-death experience, but from it, America will be reborn, and people will really come to see what matters. And I think when it comes down to like what's been happening, around the, in Iran and all these different things. I mean, everybody is like, we're on the verge of looking at World War III, or some people say 4. So, as we come to a close, because I usually don't like to go over an hour, but I could talk to you for like 5 hours, Lewis. I could just keep chatting. You're amazing, man. I really love you and your wife. You're running for governor. In fact, the night that we all were at an Airbnb just right up the road from where I am, you basically announced your campaign that night to us. Mm-hmm. So why did you decide to run for office?
Yeah, it was an interesting decision, but it came to me being fed up that I think the candidates were avoiding the 3 top issues. They weren't even in their top 10. And to me, that's exposing the parasite controllers and the corruption that runs the state of California. I heard nothing in regards to that. Barely anybody ever even mentioned human trafficking, which blew me away. Right? It's the largest industry in California from a profit perspective. And they didn't mention election fraud. Like, well, how's that possible? So, and I constantly had people say, can you run? Can you run? Can you run? I had it in chat and text messages and emails, stuff like this. And I really hadn't considered it. In fact, I even told them, I said, with the election fraud, it would be ridiculous for me to run because I'd have no chance. And then I know you understand this. God just talked to me. He goes, "You're running. You have to do this, but you're the disruptor. You're the guy that's going to expose all this stuff." So I don't know what traction I'll get. Have a feeling it's going to be pretty big, and I know I'm the guy that's supposed to expose what other people don't have the courage to do. And I draw my courage directly from the Lord Almighty, so I'm not really worried. Um, but I did have strong conversations with my family and so on and so forth. And I can't be naive that it will disrupt their lives. But I really had to ask myself, and I had to talk with my wife, is I said, What type of place are we leaving for our children and our children's children and all the other kids that are growing up if I don't say something and do something, right? And the reality is, whatever temporary disruption we'll have in our lives now will pale in comparison to what their lives will look like if we did nothing. And then that was it. And then she supported me. It was very hard for her, and then she started to throw her support behind me, and now we're going full on full strength. And I think people are going to be very, very surprised at the outcome. I believe God has anointed us to do this, so we'll see what happens.
Well, and even with Newsom, I call him Gruesome Newsom. I mean, I believe we were called Newsom,
We did,
and I
100%.
believe they cheated on that as well.
They did.
But and many of you watching, as we just kind of close out the show today, and we're going to talk about Rev 17, that there's still, I think, some tickets available. But many of you watching have gone through a lot of challenges. You've lost people. The writer of my movie, the director of my film. I've lost a lot of people. And it got to the point because, we're in a real war, everyone, and we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, but we're wrestling against principalities and powers and rulers of wickedness in high places. That's why these people that we're fighting, they've given themselves over to Satan, Luciferians. I mean, they, like Jesus said, this is my body, like at first remember, they were all following Jesus, all the miracles, signs and wonders, but he got to the point where he started changing his narrative, like you have to eat my body and drink my blood. They kind of went like, what is this guy, a cannibal? Like, what's the deal? And they all left. And he looked at his disciples and he said, are you going to leave? And they said, no, we've been around you for 3 years. We know that there's more of a meaning to it than that. And that's what Satan does. He literally takes these kids and they literally use the adrenochrome and the fear, and as hard as it is for you to hear this, that's what they do. And it's like almost like a sacrament to them. But God is exposing that, and that's what the tunnels, what Lewis was talking about, and these people that get to the highest levels in government, media. I'll just finish. I feel like God wants me to tell this story. He said, it doesn't matter how long your show goes. It's not going to go that much longer. Johnny Gosh. You probably heard the Johnny Gosh story. He was the first kid in a milk carton. And I remember seeing it when I was like, in junior high or whatever. And I remember seeing this, and I see this kid, have you seen me? And I never forget it because the kid had these kind of fat cheeks, freckles, and his hair kind of swooped over on his forehead. Never forgot that years later, Tony Nassif, he had Preventing Abuse Foundation, and he actually had Noreen Gosh at this, Universal hotel up there by Universal Studios. And I remember interviewing Noreen Gosh, and with my videographer, and I remember her telling the story. Johnny Gosh was abducted in 1982 as a 12-year-old paper boy. And when he didn't get the papers, the people were calling, where is he? And his mom, literally the police didn't come right away. And all I can say is, cutting to the chase, is eventually she had to hire her own private detective. She was on America's Most Wanted like 4 times, which now there's some things with John Walsh that could be subject. But finally was on the Lisa Gibbons show, Lewis, and she shared her story. And she said, Johnny, your father and I are no longer married. We're no longer living in the same house you were abducted from. But she said, Johnny, my address is in the Des Moines phone book. Please come home. 3 months later, she told me this in the interview, knock on the door, middle of the night. She goes to the peephole and looks out, and she hears the voice of her son. And she hears the voice saying, Mom, it's me, Johnny. Now he's in his 20s. And she opened the door and he's with a kid about his age. And they come and sit down in the living room and he says, Mom, I was abducted by an elite pedophile ring that goes up to the highest levels of government, entertainment, and business. And he said, eventually I escaped. But he said, I have to stay hidden because they'll kill me, they'll kill you. And there's a lot of people that are like Johnny Gosch that are out there. She wrote a book called Johnny Come Home. And so I'm telling you, what Lewis is doing, what I'm doing with the many freedom fighters around the world, we have got to help the children. And I believe, Lewis, that what you're doing with your run for governor, we have got to get in back of Lewis Herms. Lewis, where can people, how can they support you, Lewis?
They could go. In fact, the site just came up today. You can go to Herms for Cali, HERMSFORCALI, Herms for Cali. There's some information there. My platform's going up there. They're going to see everything about me. There's places that you can click to pray. That would be helpful. The reality is they're predicting it's going to take $50 million to win this race. I've run the numbers. I've consulted with some people that actually, and I can probably do it on 1/5 that amount because of the platform and exposure that we have, and nobody's going to outwork me. I guarantee you that. And I'm about as grassroots as it gets. So our message is going to get through there, but this is a serious run. So if somebody could help out financially, I'm telling you, I will not be bought though. So if you want to offer me a lot of money and you want to control me, just ignore it. Don't even make that donation. But if you sincerely want to take care of California and the children, I'm your guy.
Well, Lewis, thank you so much. Let's pull up the Rev 17 flyer, please, as we close out today. Lewis and I are both going to be at this event. I'm one of the speakers. I'm also going to be doing interviews there. Lewis, are you speaking?
I am speaking.
Yeah, Lewis will be speaking as well. And are you going to do interviews as well there?
Yeah, I'll be there all 3 days, actually.
Yeah, so will I. So listen, you can go to peaceofheaven.live and you can actually, I think the tickets are very minimally priced. I think like $69 or something like that. And it's 3 full days. You've got, different, not only will Lewis be there, myself, but you've got Laura Logan, you've got Basil Boz, who I've interviewed many times, him and his wife, Tina. Literally, he's a former CIA operative there. There is some good people in the CIA during, some in particular certain, certain time frames. But Boz was one of them. And Mary O'Neill Flynn, General Flynn's sister. You've got Craig Sawyer. So many different people will be there. I think they're going to be streaming it as well. So you can get more information by going to peaceofheaven.live. And we hope to see you this week. And it's up in Yuba City at a church called Church of Glad Tidings. A little bit outside of Sacramento. And so we're going to be both there. And we hope that you will be there because there's a place that actually they're trying to purchase. And they're going to call it Peace of Heaven. It's a former minimum security women's prison that they've got it down to. It was, I don't know how many millions, but finally they got it down to what?
That was 14. They got it down to 4 million.
Right. And so now they've raised half the money, but now they only have till the end of June to raise this money. So really part of it is really to help people that can sow into this Peace of Heaven project. Lee Dundas is on the board. She'll also be at this event, Attorney Lee Dundas, and a number of other people. So, we're there to really help hold up the arms of these freedom fighters and really help secure, this money that can come in so we can start building these prototypes for the kids. Because, Lewis, as we just finish up today, this movie Cages is coming back to me right now. As hard as it is, you guys, and this is why we should literally be marching in the streets. I mean, really, don't you think, Lewis?
Oh, absolutely. Is there anything more important than saving the children? That's why I'm blown away that none of these candidates talk about this. There's nothing more important than that.
But I mean, the Cages, your film, because I want to go see that. I mean, I want to go and see that movie. The Cages just as hard as it is, people, you guys got a shock value. When I have like a 6-year-old little grandson, Landon, and I look at him and I go, this would be like somebody's little treat. I mean, I know it's hard for you to think about, but the pedophiles, I heard Victor Amato or somebody was talking, I think it was on Nino's show, and he was telling that he said there's probably 3 million pedophiles in America, 3%.
Yeah,
Of the
I've heard
country.
that the numbers are extraordinary.
So you're dealing with a sickness that is coming in through the porn, through a number of things, and we've got to stop. We've got to stop it. And you know what I mean? I think anybody can be redeemed. I really do through Jesus. But I mean, I was at a movie called Buying Her. It was a guy that was in there, a Christian guy. He talked about he got involved with porn and eventually it got a little bit darker. It had to be a little rougher. It had to be a little whatever. And one day, Lewis, he was just walking to his car. He saw a girl walk by that was his it girl. And for whatever, something overpowered him. And he literally asked her a question, then pushed her in the car, her car. He was going to rape her. And all of a sudden he looked at the fear in her eyes. Something snapped him out of it. And he said, I'm sorry, ran back to his car. She got his license number and literally what he went through. This man and his wife now are living in Alaska, and he's working with people of how to break free from porn. And I'm telling you, I've had him on my show, Gene McConnell. Unbelievable. It was called Buying Her. And people, you know what? It's like people don't know who to tell, Lewis.
No.
The reason they don't talk about it at churches, because 80% of the pastors are watching things that aren't appropriate, correct?
Right. And doing things that are inappropriate.
Right. So this exposure, God is going to expose it. And that's what we're here. We're not going to try to throw stones at people. We've all had stuff. But let me tell you, when you do something to a little kid and, you know, it got so bad sometimes, Lewis, I just said to the Lord, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And you know what the Lord said to me? He said to me, but what about the children? And that it brought it home. I said, you're right, God. Some of these children are being raped repeatedly day and night. And the average age, what's the average age of how long do they last usually? Like the average age of a trafficked kid?
Well, it varies. The one I saw was 12, and but some of them say it's as little as 7 months on average from when they're trafficked. That's deep. That is deep. But that's 7 months of torture. That's what people need to understand. And the reason why the traffickers have shift their focus from fentanyl and things like that to children is because you can resell a child over and over in the same day. You can only sell a drug one time. So, and they have no conscience whatsoever.
Well, let's pray right now. I felt that God said we need to pray. This is a hard topic, but let me tell you this. If it happened to your child or to your grandchild, you would do everything possible. Like Noreen Gosh, when her son got abducted, she ended up passing the Johnny Gosh bill. I mean, she did everything in her power. She became an advocate. You know what I mean? She turned it on her, and it was a pedophile ring. Eventually, you've heard of the Franklin conspiracy, the Franklin cover-up. Paul Benassi actually was the one. He finally said that he was the one that helped, and he had been raped and stuff when he was young. And then they actually had him go. And anyway, God said, don't get into all of that. Right now, let's pray, Lewis, as we close out the show today. We have to get in the game, and we have to really let our voices be heard for the children. And I really believe that, Lewis, that God has called you to the kingdom for such a time as this. And as goes California, goes the nation. There's a great awakening that's going to happen in California, a greater awakening than what happened, God told me, than in the Jesus movement days. And we are going to see the greatest show on earth. So do you want to start the prayer, Lewis, and then I'll finish it and we'll close out the show?
Sure. Thank you. Lord, I so appreciate you giving us this platform for this awakening, which is so important. It's on all of our hearts, and it should be watching here, I'm sure, and it should be on everybody's heart, because the children are definitely the future and they make the difference. Lord, please guide us to do the best we possibly can in order to save the children, save California, which in turn I agree will save the United States. Give us the power, give us the focus to make the difference in this fight. I am at your beck and call to make sure I do my best, as well as our team. Take it away, Meri.
Yeah, and I'm hearing a prophetic rhyme from the heart of God, and it's a sign. And the Lord said that I am in heaven and it's divine, but the Lord said, I'm opening up a portal and I'm going to bring forth the new wine. And I am getting ready to bring forth my life and my power into this world. And God said, I'm going to open up the heavens and I'm going to shower the people with my blessings. And the Lord said, the enemy tries to come in and devour and kill and steal and destroy. But God said, I am going to come and bring you joy. And the Lord said, and now I'm wanting to speak to your hearts, to tell you about the children and what you can impart. All of you can pray. All of you can get on your knees and say, Lord, free them. Because I listen and watch every night, says the Lord, from my throne in heaven. And I look down and I see, says the Lord. I see. And so this is the key to free. Are you willing to get into the game? Are you willing to call upon my name? Are you willing, said the Lord, no matter what the shame or the blame or the pain or the times they felt like they were going insane? If you're willing, then I'm able. And I'll bring you into the kingdom. And it will seem like a fable, but God said, I will bring you to my table. And I will bring you to my table that you will be one of my assets that will go and help find them, that you will go help and bring them in, because this is the time that I will free my people from sin, including the ones that have trafficked these children. There's many of them that were trafficked when they were younger. They got perverted. They got destroyed. It destroyed them. But now God says, I am releasing upon all of you now, Isaiah 61, to go and preach good news to the poor, the opening of the prison to those who are bound, those who are lost will now be found. So God, I thank you as we close out this show. I thank you that you would bless them, keep them, at your face would shine upon them and be gracious to them. Lift up your countenance and grant them your peace. In Jesus' name. Thank you, Lewis, for coming on. Thanks for watching. Now is the time. Please share this with as many people as you can. Please go to Lewis Herms' website and please support him. If you can't, give any money today, you can at least pray. That's what we all can do. We can all pray. So thank you, Lewis. Thank you for watching. Now is the time. We'll see you next time. God bless.